The dazzling skyline of Dubai shimmered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows of the luxury penthouse suite. Theo Carter stood silently, staring at the city below while his reflections stared back at him from the glass. At 32, he looked older than he should have. His neatly tailored charcoal suit hid the exhaustion that years of stress had carved into his face. He adjusted his tie for what felt like the 100th time that morning and released a weary sigh. Another day serving Richard Sterling awaited him. "Theo, where's my coffee?" The sharp command echoed from the adjoining room. Theo closed his eyes briefly before forcing a professional smile. "Coming, Mr. Sterling." Moving quickly to the kitchenette, he prepared the coffee exactly the way his employer demanded. Precise temperature, exact measurements, no room for error. 5 years. 5 years of working as executive assistant to one of the most feared venture capitalists in the business world. Richard Sterling was brilliant, wealthy, and wildly successful. He was also arrogant, demanding, and nearly impossible to please. Every day brought new criticism, impossible deadlines, and endless humiliation. Most people would have quit long ago. Theo couldn't. His mother's medical expenses depended on the paycheck. So he endured. "Theo." The impatient shout snapped him from his thoughts. "I'm bringing it now, sir." He carried the steaming mug into the suite's main living area. Richard lounged comfortably on an expensive leather sofa, dressed in silk sleepwear despite the late hour. Even at rest, he projected authority. His silver-streaked hair was perfectly styled, and his cold gray eyes seemed to evaluate everything around him. Including people. Especially people. Richard grabbed the mug and took a sip. Immediately, he frowned. "It's cold." Theo blinked. The coffee had been boiling hot moments ago. "I can make another one." "You should." Theo swallowed his frustration and nodded. "Of course, sir." As he turned toward the kitchenette, Richard called after him. "And don't forget our meeting with the Alfod group this afternoon. Pick up my navy suit from the tailor before noon." "Yes, sir." "Try not to make a mess of it this time." Theo clenched his jaw but kept walking. This business trip had already been exhausting, and they had only been in Dubai for 2 days. What he wouldn't give for a break. Just one day without Richard Sterling. One day of peace. Unfortunately for Theo, fate had something far stranger in mind. Later that afternoon, the desert heat pressed down like a heavy blanket as Theo hurried through the crowded streets carrying Richard's freshly tailored suit. He checked his watch. Late. Again. If he didn't return soon, Richard would undoubtedly find a reason to blame him. As Theo rounded a quiet side street, something caught his eye. A flash of brass. Half buried beneath a drift of sand sat an old oil lamp. It looked ancient. Curious despite himself, Theo stepped closer and brushed away the sand. Elegant patterns curled across its tarnished surface. The metal was worn with age, yet strangely beautiful. He should have ignored it. Instead, he picked it up. The lamp felt surprisingly heavy. Almost alive. A faint warmth pulsed through the metal and into his hand. Theo frowned. "That's odd." He glanced at his watch again. No time. Yet for reasons he couldn't explain, he slipped the lamp into his briefcase. Maybe it would make an interesting souvenir. With that, he hurried away. Behind him, unnoticed beneath the blazing sun, the lamp briefly shimmered with a faint golden glow. And somewhere far beyond human sight, something awakened. Theo Harper left the conference room feeling like he was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. Behind him, the polished glass doors slid shut, cutting off the sound of conversation and laughter from the executives inside. Ahead stretched a long hallway lined with marble floors and expensive artwork. Normally, the luxury would have impressed him. Today, it only reminded him how little he mattered. "Theo." The voice stopped him cold. He turned slowly. Victor Sterling stood in the doorway, his expression dark with irritation. "What happened in there?" Victor demanded. "I needed you focused. I needed you paying attention. Instead, you sat there looking lost." "I'm sorry," Theo replied quietly. "Sorry doesn't fix mistakes." Victor stepped closer. "For someone whose entire job is supporting me, you seem remarkably bad at it lately." Theo clenched his fists. Years ago, those words would have crushed him. Now they simply exhausted him. "I said I'm sorry." Victor stared at him for a moment before scoffing. Just make sure it doesn't happen again. Without another word, he turned and walked away. Theo watched him disappear down the corridor. 5 years. 5 years of impossible expectations. 5 years of insults disguised as criticism. 5 years of sacrificing his own happiness for a paycheck. The moment Victor vanished around the corner, Theo headed straight for the elevator. By the time he reached his hotel room, anger and frustration were boiling inside him. He slammed the door behind him. Silence. For the first time all day, there were no demands. No meetings. No orders. Just him. Theo dropped onto the edge of the bed and buried his face in his hands. Something had to change. He couldn't keep living like this. A strange glow suddenly illuminated the room. Theo looked up. His briefcase sat open on the desk. Inside, the antique brass lamp he had discovered earlier was shining with a soft golden light. What the? The lamp rose into the air. Theo stumbled backward. The room filled with swirling silver mist that poured from the lamp's spout like smoke. The cloud expanded, twisting and spiraling until it formed the shape of a man. A very large man. Tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in midnight blue robes embroidered with constellations, the stranger seemed to radiate ancient power. His eyes glowed like molten gold. When he spoke, his voice echoed through the room. Greetings, bearer of the lamp. Theo stared in disbelief. The figure smiled. I am Zahir, spirit of the hidden sands. You have awakened me from centuries of slumber. Theo blinked. No. Absolutely not. The spirit raised an eyebrow. No. This isn't real. It very much is. Genies don't exist. We prefer jinn, the spirit corrected politely. Genie sounds terribly outdated. Theo simply stared. The jinn chuckled. I understand your skepticism. Most mortals react similarly. So you're telling me you're actually a magical wish-granting spirit? Correct. And this isn't some elaborate prank? No. Theo sat heavily on the edge of the bed. For several moments, neither spoke. Finally, Theo asked the obvious question. What happens now? The jinn smiled. Now, you receive 3 wishes. The room suddenly felt much smaller. 3 wishes. 3 opportunities to change everything. Wealth. Success. Freedom. Any dream he had ever imagined was within reach. Yet strangely, none of those things were what came to mind first. Instead, Theo thought about Victor. About years of humiliation. About every cruel remark. Every impossible demand. Every moment he had been made to feel small. And for the first time, he wondered what life would be like if the balance of power shifted.